The Goonies is one of the most beloved and iconic movies of the 1980s, and I'm really not going to talk about it too much because chances are you've already seen the movie yourself and you know exactly why it's so special. Now, as far as the game goes, this gem was released by Konami in late 1987, and you got to keep in mind here that aside from Nintendo Power and Talk on the Playground, we didn't really have any idea what games were good and what games were bad. But there is one thing that we could be sure of back in the day at least, is that if the label said Konami, it meant quality. Now what exactly made this game so special? There's only one way to find out. Let's play some damn games. Now for starters, this game looks and sounds just as good as I remember it, but what do you expect? This is an old school Konami game after all. Back in the day, Konami actually made games that were meant to hold up 25 years later. What? Oh, you must have been thinking about the Goonies too!
You klutz!
You see, growing up, I always thought it was called Goonies 2 because it was kind of like a video game sequel to a movie. Almost the same way that people look at the 2009 Ghostbusters game as Ghostbusters 3. But as it turns out, there actually was an original Goonies game that was released only in Japan on the Famicom and also on the DS system, which is really just a coin-operated NES. And believe it or not, it was a pretty damn good game. Alright, now seriously, playing the original one for the first time, I was able to pick it up and get into it right away because the gameplay is very similar, but at the same time a little bit different from the Goonies 2. This plays a little bit more like an arcade game. You still play as Mikey and you go around jumping on platforms and then you drop kick mice. One thing that definitely took a little bit of getting used to was instead of a yo-yo, you just get this high roundhouse kick. I mean, at least if you get bored at any time, you can stop and start kicking to the music. I mean, what can I really say about this game? The graphics are appealing, the music is just as catchy as the second one. In fact, there's a lot more music from the movie in this one than there is in the NES one. Most of the sound effects from the second one are in this one too, so I guess this is where those sounds originated from. Huh. During my playthrough, the only enemies that I really encountered were mice, a fox here and there, a couple skeletons, and I was even chased down by Jake Vitelli at some point. You know how I know it was him? Because he stops and tries to hurt you with his singing. And the first time that I saw him do it, I thought that was fucking awesome. The only complaint that I really have about this game is just that it kind of sucks that we never got this game commercially released in America. Because this is a great game, and if you're a fan of the Goonies too, you'll definitely enjoy this one. So if you get a chance to play it, definitely try it out. I highly recommend it. Now you really didn't think that I was just going to leave you hanging and talk about one and not the other, right? Good, because now that we've gotten this 2 bullshit squared away, we can finally move on and talk about the main event. Now 1987 was a great year to be a video game fan, because that was the year that a ton of great cult classics were released, including The Goonies 2! Now why am I sitting here and holding up the game like this? I've got no fucking clue. See, apparently this is something that us video game reviewers are supposed to do. We sit, we talk about the game, and then we hold it up like we're a fucking deranged flight attendant. Anyways, one of the first things that I instantly think of when I play this game is that it's like Castlevania for kids, because it plays exactly the same. You even get knocked back every time an enemy hits you. The only real difference is that instead of a whip, you get a yo-yo, but it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Now, along the way, you'll also find a slingshot and a boomerang, but on top of that, you get Molotov cocktails and bombs. The bombs are for finding secret rooms and hidden passages, and the cocktails are for taking out tougher enemies. Huh, kinda like the holy water in Castlevania, huh?
Once again, you play as Mikey, and it's your goal to rescue the Goonies and a mermaid named Annie who were kidnapped by Mama Fratelli as revenge for being put in jail at the end of the movie, which means that you've got to run all over the place looking for your friends while avoiding the Fratellis and all sorts of other creatures. The game does take place over several locations. None of them really seem to follow anything from the movie except in the beginning, but that really doesn't matter because they definitely ran through a good list of cool places to visit. You start off in what I could only assume is the restaurant from the movie. I mean, that's what I always called it. Then you work your way down to a basement, and then you have several different types of underground caves, a few underwater spots, a couple of ice levels, then there's an outdoor trek on the bridge from the Temple of Doom, and then there's even an underground volcano with dragons in it. Jesus Christ, Astoria just has everything, doesn't it?
These days, people are pretty cautious about playing video games based off of movies, but back in the day, everybody was absolutely terrified of it. That's why growing up in the NES era, I learned at a young age to ask myself, do I like the name, or do I like the game? Let me give you a quick example here. Resident Evil is one of my all-time favorite franchises, but I also think that it's fair to say that as time has gone by, the series has gone downhill more and more. So much, in fact, that by the time I saw the first trailers for Operation Raccoon City, I was asking myself, do you deep down inside secretly want to play a bad Spec Ops ripoff that just has a coat of Resident Evil paint splattered on it like...
One thing that really stood out to me about this game is that it's got a really good variety of enemies. Now, when you start off, you just have to deal with small things like snakes and spiders and an occasional bat. Then, depending on where you are, different enemies will pop up. A couple more of the more memorable ones to me were Eskimos, octopus, sharks, some weird thing that I can only assume is just a gigantic scorpion, and then there's this creepy winged skeleton thing that takes about 1,000,000 hits to destroy. Speaking of creepy, one thing that used to scare the shit out of me as a kid was Mama Fratelli in the intro. Looking at her now, it kind of looks like Sam Kinison and he's having a hard time scratching his nose. Now, as far as gameplay goes, the game does have really solid platforming, and like I said, it's set in a vast open world that's loaded with secrets and hidden passages. And if you take the time to go through every area, you'll actually find dozens of items that'll help you get through the game much easier. Now, getting every item isn't a requirement for beating the game, and I kind of like it that way. This early form of non-linear gameplay, where it's more about choosing the path that you feel is best to get through the game, has definitely evolved over the years, but for its time, it's done really, really well. Now, the controls on the side-scrolling areas, which thankfully is where you're going to spend the majority of your time, are really simple and straightforward, and the character does handle quite nicely. Now, one monster pain in the ass with this game is the map. I have no idea how the fuck to make any sense of this map at all. And if the kids in the movie had to read the map the way that I have to read it in the game, they would have probably wound up somewhere in Arizona. The only way that I personally could have made any sense out of this map is not using it all and just memorizing locations. Because whoever drew this map probably drew the map to get the red bud.
Okay, seriously? This map, you've got to see it to believe it, alright? Let me just pull it up right over here. Alright, what the hell is this, and how the hell does this even begin to qualify as a map? You know what this looks like to me? This looks like the guy from Bionic Commando is about to blow up the ship from Galaga. And what's worse than how the map looks is navigating in itself. Because looking at this map right now, it doesn't even connect. It doesn't even function as a map. And this is just the front part of it. If you go through one of those first-person areas and come out the other side, there's actually a back end that looks completely different.
This is ridiculous. It's crazy. I feel like I'm babysitting, except I'm not getting paid.
This map is probably the worst map I've ever seen in my life. How the hell it qualifies as a map is beyond me. Do you remember that part in Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, when the kid opens up the map? That's the map from the Goonies. It gives you no landmarks whatsoever. You have no idea where the hell you are. The only thing that you can even get to begin to add to this map is a Goonies locator device. And that's great, but I still can't read this goddamn map. And one of my biggest pet peeves in video games is when you get a map that you can't read. I'd rather have no map at all then sit there for 10 minutes looking at this goddamn thing and wondering, where the hell am I?
That's right.
Another thing that busts my balls is navigating the rooms in the first-person mode. You know, it's cool to do it, but the direction that the screen is facing is always the same. Beautiful, fair enough. But you have to watch out for the direction that Mikey is facing. Otherwise, you're going to wind up going out the same way that you came in and get hit by an enemy. What a pain in the ass that is. Now, over the years, the first-person view mode in the Goonies has been compared to the cabin mode from the Friday the 13th game. Only the Friday the 13th cabin mode is typically considered to be much better and easier to navigate. But let's be honest here, after a fucking year and a half difference in game development, it's damn well better. Now, come to think of it, it makes perfect sense. Corey Feldman left Friday the 13th Part 5 to go do the Goonies movie, so Friday the 13th, the game, took Goonies 2's interface as revenge.
It sucked.
You know, while we're on the subject, the big difference between these two games is that Friday the 13th's cabin mode, like I said, it's easier to navigate, but also, you're going to see Jason's life bar, which makes the tension go through the roof because Jason can literally be around any corner. It's got a purpose. There's a reason for it. And in the Goonies, it's just plain boring. You have no idea what is where, and you're literally going into every single room and following the same formula. Punch the wall, put on the glasses, and hit the wall with a hammer. Again, and again, and again. And later on in the game, you're going to have to use the hammer on the ceiling and the floor to check for hidden passages. And if all else fails, try going left and right. Who gives a shit if there's a door there? Sometimes it just might work. And don't get me wrong, I love the idea of early exploring and discovering, but would it have killed them to put a crack in the wall, or some type of a shitty paint job? Just some tiny hint that makes you go, I think something might be there. And if that's not cryptic enough for you, wait until you meet some of the batshit nuts people that you find in some of these rooms. One room has an Eskimo that literally tells you there's nothing in there, and believe it or not, the son of a bitch isn't lying to you. There really isn't anything in there. You just wasted your time. Then in another room, you find this old woman complaining that she can't see without her glasses. So I go, I find the glasses, I go all the way back to the room and I try to give it to her and nothing happens. Great, I've wasted more of my fucking time. Oh, and let's not forget my personal favorite, the cranky old bitch sitting in a room that gives you attitude the second you walk in the room. Nothing that you try to do makes this woman happy, but if you hit her with your fist 5 times, she'll give you a candle, an item that's absolutely necessary to get through this game, which leaves me wondering, how the fuck would anybody playing this game for the first time know that an item that's absolutely necessary to beat this game is only given to you after you knock the shit out of an old woman sitting in a cave? Well, that's Konami for you.
Siempre hay que cerrar las drogas.
Wait a minute, this music sounds really familiar. Oh, Konami, you assholes. But the worst thing, though, are the safes. I don't mind that they exist, and I don't even care that the majority of them have stupid shit like messages that say, playing the Goonies 2 is fun. Fine, whatever. My beef is, though, is that once you open a safe and you leave the room and come back in, the goddamn safe is closed and locked again. And the bitch of the whole thing is that if you forgot that you've already been there, or even worse than that, gone halfway across the game and forgotten where a critical item is, and you start backtracking, you're going to open up safes left and right, which naturally depletes the keys that you need to rescue the Goonies. Now, keys aren't too hard to find, I mean, you just kill enemies, but like most video games from the time, if you need one, the game knows you need it, so it automatically stops giving you that specific item. So once you've rescued the last Goonie, it's time to rescue Andy the Mermaid, and there's no real big deal behind it. There's no final boss or big climactic event, you just unlock the giant door and... there it is. To be honest, I'm kind of glad that there isn't a final boss, because knowing video games and Konami at the time, you'd probably fight Ian Ramsey's floating head, and that would send several kids screaming off into years of therapy. So after Annie professes her love for Mikey, the police finally arrive, and they load Mama Fratelli in a van that's bigger than the building that you just spent the last 40 minutes running around in. You know, this right here is an even bigger question to me. Where the hell were the cops during this whole thing anyway? Didn't the Fratellis go on television and flat out admit that they kidnapped little kids and endangered wildlife? Don't you think the police would have been a little bit more interested in something like that? Then again, if you saw how the police handled things in the movie, you can't really blame Mikey for saying, fuck it, I'll do it myself.
Now, like I said before, 1987 was a great year for video games, and this game is a solid reason why. Does it have some weird shit in it? Yeah, it does. But it still holds up really, really well 31 years later. Like the original Goonies game, the graphics are appealing, the music is solid and catchy, and the platforming, I really can't complain about it. Yeah, the first-person view mode was new at the time, but it still sucked ass. And the map? I don't even want to get back into that one again. But those are really minor things when you just look at the grand scheme that is the game itself, because it did have quite a few nice little innovations going for it at the time. Now, I also wanted to take just a second here to wish my little niece a happy birthday. And of course, being in our family, it would fall on Friday the 13th. So, Madam Mackenzie, happy 7th birthday from Uncle Chris. Now, how can I really sum up my experience playing the Goonies 2 in like maybe 2 sentences? Well, shit, this was my last weekend. My last Goonie weekend. I should have been going out in style. Cruising the coast, sniffing some lace, down in the brews, but no! I had to go and screw it up by playing the Goonies 2.
Look, mister, I need a ride. My friends and I just had a run-in with these really disgusting people. You might have heard of them. I can describe all 3 of them.
Bimba dagli occhi vieni da Maria.